Hello and welcome to this Family Business Histories webinar. It's a great pleasure to have you all here with us today. My name is Farida Al-Agami. I'm the General Manager of the Tharawat Family Business Forum, and together with our co-director, Professor Martin Klimke from NYU Abu Dhabi, it's a great pleasure for us to welcome you all after a bit of a hiatus in the Family Business Histories webinar series. Before we start with our core session, we would like to just help out with a couple of pieces of information. So feel free to interact with us today. The whole point of these FBH webinars is for you to have the opportunity to interact with our speakers, ask your questions, make your comments. Many of you are family businesses, so feel free to interact with us and to ask your questions or make your comments. If you have any trouble, please feel free to contact our team, and we recommend that you adjust your Zoom view. Obviously, after 2 years of webinars, I think we're all used to it by now, but feel free to adjust your Zoom view at the best to your most preferred settings. So before starting with our core session, and since some of you are here for the first time, Martin and I thought it would be great if we can give you a quick overview over this very special project that is so close to our hearts. So what is Family Business Histories? FBH, or Family Business Histories, is the result of a 4-year collaboration. It's been 4 years, Martin, already. It's incredible. A 4-year collaboration between NYU Abu Dhabi and the Tharawat Family Business Forum. So, of course, that means that we have a globally leading educational institution and academic research center and a nonprofit private sector association, partnering together to create this new platform and this new way of reflecting on family business histories focused on MENASA. So we look at MENA, so Middle East, North Africa, as well as South Asia. So what are we really doing in this project? Our whole vision is really focused on a few corner points. We want to compile, document, and analyze the history, legacy, and also the socioeconomic impact of family businesses in the GCC MENASA region. We felt when we started this project that really not enough was being done on this point. And just to recall why we think that this is such an important topic is to kind of, remind ourselves how important family businesses are across the world, really. As we can see that across the world, family businesses really dominate the private sector and are the most important ownership form in the corporate space. So of course, that means we need to understand, their impact on the growth of economies, on the development of economies, but also how geopolitical realities have impacted their individual growth. So our project, in a nutshell, has 4 goals. Our first goal sounds simple, is very complex, is to understand the history. So really kind of gathering information and really trying to, map what is happening what happened in the region. We are also here to highlight legacy, and this is really also in line with the webinar that we are having today. We want to look at each family's legacy and really the economic impact that they are leaving behind in the region and beyond. Something that is very crucial in our region, where in some countries preserving heritage is actually under quite a lot of pressure and under quite a lot of danger. We feel that in collaboration with the NYU Abu Dhabi Library, it's really important for us to capture what is possible of this heritage and preserve it. And of course, the ultimate outcome of our project is to really support current and future leaders with a different perspective on leadership, with a different perspective on kind of the historical significance of today's and yesterday's family businesses, and perhaps influence tomorrow's companies as well. A few announcements before we launch into our session. Our website is now also available in Arabic, and feel free to kind of go and visit and browse around. I can really recommend that you also download both in Arabic and English our 3 case studies that we currently have on the website. And with the future coming fast, we hope that by the end of the year we can really update you with a fantastic project, part of the project that we've been working on for a while. Looking at Martin, I think that it's going to come up very soon that we can announce what we've been cooking in the FBH kitchen. For you to stay up to date with us, of course, you're most welcome to follow our new LinkedIn page. It will really help you kind of stay up to date with our project and what is going on around this topic in the region. So without any further ado, it's a great pleasure for me to announce Alexander Nehme, who is a partner and board member at Nehmeh Group in Qatar. And Alexander is going to be our keynote speaker today. Welcome, Alexander, to FBH. It's really a great pleasure for us to have you here with us. So Alexander will be sharing the story of his family business, but not just that. Alexander will be really talking about the historical journey that he has been through himself by capturing the history of his own family business. So the way we are going to progress in a moment is that he will share his family history, and then we will have about 30 minutes to discuss and debate some of the big questions around family business history. Before I hand over to Alexander, of course, because we have a really nice and illustrious group of attendees here with us today, we wanted to have your opinions. We wanted to ask you one specific question, which we hope to inform the next part of our conversation as well. We would love to know from you what your opinion is on why family business history is important. So you should see the poll coming up on your screen, and feel free to answer the question. So why is family business history important? For the identity of the family, for the marketing of the business, to help succession planning, or for leaders to learn from the past, or perhaps you have even other opinions. As the host, I always have the privilege of seeing how things are moving ahead. So this is very interesting. I can see some active voting going on. I'll give you a few more seconds to share your opinion. Okay, the competition is ongoing. It's quite interesting. All right, let me publish the poll now, and we'll see the results. And Martin, feel free to jump in to comment. So I think very interesting, as you can see, the majority, so 47% of you think that it's very important for the identity of the family. Of course, we've limited you by having only one option. I know that it's a more complex question than that. What's very interesting is that nobody felt that it was important for the marketing of the business, or at least it's not a priority, which I think is quite interesting. And then 24% to help succession planning, and 29% for leaders to learn from the past. So quite an interesting piece of feedback, which I think together with Alexander and Martin, we can perhaps pick up on those results later on. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, Alexander. And once again, thank you so much for your openness and your willingness to share the story of your family here with us at FBH.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Farida and Sarawat team, and Joy, of course. And thank you, Martin, from New York University, Abu Dhabi. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity as well. I'll be sharing my screen now.
Of course.
So hopefully we can have a good session.
Great. Thank you.
Here we go. We're good?
Perfect. Looks great. Thank you, Alexander.
So this is Nehmeh. Nehmeh is Arabic for blessing or grace, and is also, by matter of coincidence, the actual family name. We're gonna go down through briefly about the family history, and also to explain who we are as a family, and who we are as a company, and who is this incredible individual behind this organization, our founder. So at a glance, Nehmeh has its roots in 1955 in Doha, in Qatar, and where we aim to become a great company that sets the standards for stability, growth, sustainability, and the benefit not just to our customers, but also our employees and the community at large. Here are just some brief numbers of what it is we do. And the core matter is that, we always try to set the industrial standards. From a corporate timeline point of view, this will give you a bit of a brief of how it started in the 50s, established by the founder. And then from the 60s, how it just expanded organically or otherwise. And in the 70s, different companies were set up, 80s, continuous growth. And we implemented our ERP, which was revolutionary back then. I think it was a 286 or maybe X86. And in the 90s, factories were established. And then, with the new millennium, new plants, new locations. And 2010s, we've expanded and diversified, and we've been honored with several awards. And where we are today is, we have been crystal focused on sustainability and longevity, because what we are all about is building a company, not just looking back for the past 60 years, but also building a company for the next 60 years. So the actual professionalization as well. What we do, it's a good question. So what we do is provide industrial solutions. We have 6 distinct solutions, automotive solutions. So any vehicle or a motorized vehicle that runs anywhere, there's a bit of Nehmeh inside it. From the workshop, from the PDI, from the paints, what have you. We are there by the side of every body shop or workshop. Construction solutions is, a big chunk of our business, where, and as I've said earlier, we apologize for all the noise you hear on the streets, wherever you may live, but, it makes us happy, because construction, roadworks, civil works, mechanical, it's all has to do a little bit from us as well. But so sorry about the inconvenience. Heat transfer solutions is where we manufacture. So this is manufacturing OEM standards with various accreditations, which you can see, and some for the local market as well as export markets. Rental solutions, be it for the long term or for the short term. So we're always by the side of our customers. And what we call after sales excellence, so service solutions, because we're one of the companies that, don't forget our customers after the sale. We continue the journey with them. And this is very, very important, because this is part of our customer service and a part of our promise. And finally, woodworking solutions. So from classical machinery, the ones that we see in the old movies, to the cutting edge, computerized CNC, and all the accessories and consumables required for any joinery or woodworking. We are also there providing all the requirements for the right applications. Project references, you'd appreciate. I mean, there would be a few, naturally, for the many decades that we have been in this great nation. And we look forward to being part of, because you may have heard there's a soccer game at the end of this year, which we're very, very much looking forward to, and the years beyond as well, because, after all, it's not just about 2022. I mean, there is a national vision for 2030, and, we want to be 2030, 2040. We want to continue the journey. So the question arises, how did it all start? And this is the gentleman, the hero, who left us about 12 years ago, Antoine Nehme, our late father. And why it was important, which takes me to the next phase, is how do you preserve the legacy? And this is, for me, I consider it of quite high importance. But I was always, I used to scratch my head thinking, how is this to be done? There were no blueprints. I would say there was no precursor, for something to be done, at least, as far as I know, from my knowledge, within this area. I hadn't looked at the history of very humble beginnings, a true story of success, a true story of a life well lived. it was important to, try to put it all together, for many different reasons. And, one of, as it started as an idea, right? But, it was, it wanted to be a tribute, an homage of sorts. And it started with a few notes. And for me, it was, a book of quotations. We actually kept record of the quotes, of the wisdom that was shared to us. And when I think of a few, one of my favorite is no watchman on my work if my conscience is my watchman. Where we work ethically, even when nobody's looking, and that trust is earned daily. It doesn't sleep, it doesn't get tired. ومن صدق بالعالم شاركهم بأموالهم. So it's all at the end about trust, and it's all about delivering and keeping your promise. So there was this idea of a book. Okay, so naturally the naysayers came up. What? Why are you doing this? ما عندنا هالعادات, don't bother. It's a waste of time. But as a person, I admire stubbornness a lot. What we call, for somebody to be, forgive the term in Arabic, tis, where you are, you really persevere, and you have to, continuously work, against all odds. So, what was, to put it all together, I had to think of, what was the purpose? What's the point? For me, it was documenting and sharing the life of a person who, not necessarily people have to hear about, but people have to be inspired from. At the same time, it was celebrating the 60th anniversary of the business back then. I think this was 2015, and upholding, the timeless values and the code of business. Because as you're all well aware that, in terms of core values, they don't change. As a person, think of it like this. As a person, you may change, but your fundamentals, your principles, what defines you as a person, of what you stand up for, these don't change. And for our organization, it's people, quality, trust, and commitment. And I wanted the book to be an inspiration to all readers. I was never in my wildest dreams, to actually write something or to become, to have the title of being an author. But there is no right or wrong, and this is a very important point, and it's okay, as long as you try to compile as much as you can from the past, because the past, especially in our region where perhaps we don't read as much and we don't write as much, you try to capture this oral history, this verbal stories that have been told from generation to generation. It's tough work, but it is possible, and if it wasn't possible, then I'd be looking like this. So why is the baby looking like this? Simply because, there were a lot of questions. What language should it be? What tone should the book be? Should it be Bil Arabi? Should it be in English? Should it be French? And how much of depth will it go? As a private person coming from a private family, of a private business, it was important to agree on several limits of disclosure, but at the same time, what's in the public domain is in the public domain. So I don't think anybody should fool himself or herself, thinking that, it's all, after all, we live in 2022, when last I checked, and, everything is everywhere. And the necessary approvals, approvals far and wide. Whether from people, from authorities, and this is where perhaps a bit of self-censor plays a part. But it's important to maintain the core. As long as the core is maintained, it's all good. And how much work do you have to put in it? So in terms of work, It took I think about 16 to 18 months to do, and it's okay. It starts with scribbles, it starts with drafts, but at the end you'd be amazed. And to break it down further, I was a bit discouraged early on because, okay, I have to find a title, publishing house, printing press, copywriters, advice, what is ISBN, what is this Library Congress number? So nothing to really, I would say, to worry about a lot, as long as you have a publishing house which has either done this before or, they are able to guide you through the process. Then I would think you're in good hands. Just make sure you check out the references. And, to write it, it was important to break it down. So as you can see from the images at the bottom, there are, maybe there has been a dozen rewrites, a dozen drafts, I've read it, maybe 50 times or more, and you had to always review it, and it's never perfect. And the nice thing about books these days is, you are able to have a second edition or a third edition. I haven't really gone there, but it is possible. And as you see, I mean, breaking it down is, it was important to be, as simple as possible, So when it starts with chapter 1, sandals, what? How can it be sandals? Because that's how it started. You see, I mean, for the longest time in human history, people move around, and sandals were the most important thing. And I'm very proud that our late founder has come with sandals. He wore shoes later on. But this is why the reason of calling, as well as the other chapters. So chapter 2 about the spark, the entrepreneurial journey and the start, the growth, some family, he said, she said, and then the education values of myself and my siblings, as well as loyalty, loyalty to the family, loyalty to the organization, loyalty to one's host and one's nation, and as well as sustainability and legacy. So you see, whenever you see something like that, you start thinking, wow, that's a lot of work. It is, but it's not impossible. I mean, heck, if I was able to do it, honestly, I mean, anybody can. I saw this nice image on the internet where, the tip of the iceberg is the book. Underneath that, the classic iceberg is the editing, rewriting, writing, thinking, researching, the idea thing, just putting stuff together and then dreaming of it. So it does take effort, but I promise you, the more you give in, the more you do get out of it. And then there was an issue of the title and then the graphics. So a lot of soul searching, finding something which ought to be timeless, as well as had to be, something that would create value, and at the same time, it would not alienate any specific time period or any specific event. So that's why Blessing in the Sand came in, the Antoine Nehme legacy, and then the graphics. I mean, you can see, there have been worked on so many different, graphics, colors, tone, is it going to be black and white? Is it going to be dull? Is it going to be, and then at the end, this was it. So there you have it. So this is the Blessing in the Sands, the Antoine Nehme legacy. It's about 130 pages, if I remember. And there's a lot of history, a lot of drive, a lot of passion, that's for sure. And also a lot of stories where really anybody could learn from, I remember in the book, because, it was clearly the Antoine Nehme legacy, I think anybody could be as great as this great man. You just have to persevere, you just have to work non-stop, and no matter how much people will try to pull you back, tell you this can't be done or this wasn't done, it doesn't matter. You can write your own story. And that's a wrap from me for my presentation. So gracias, thank you, shukran, and obrigado. Right?
Thank you so much, Alexander, for this wonderful presentation, and for these, wonderful animations as well, as the wisdom that was embedded in it, together with the reflections, on, your family's history, the legacy of your late father, and was very, very moving. Thanks so much for sharing with us. There are so many things that I could ask you now. I think there are so many things I think that are, on the minds of the audience, and we'll get to all of them. I want to start maybe with something that, we saw a little bit manifested in the poll as well that we just had at the beginning of the call. And that is, what are the key learning points that we can take away from your founder's journey and your family business history? I mean, this is hard to sort of answer in one single sentence, so feel free to elaborate. But what do you think, also with the experience of, having written the book, how do you describe the distillation of that?
I think it's sticking to one's principles. I mean, when you have solid principles, I mean, the nucleus of any society is family. So the family has its own rule book, has its own constitution. Some families have an actual vision statement and a mission statement. What's important is if you have those values and principles which you have learned from, you simply don't want to lose them. And what you want to do is you want to preserve them, for future generations. So I would say, a lot of the learning from it would be a lot of perseverance, and a lot of quotes, because I'm sure every father and mother, every parent out there, we all remember, my mother would have said this, my father would have said that. To be able to write this and to be able to preserve it, because one of the most important things I've learned is, the written word outlives human lives, so which is, people die, but books don't, so I would say these, so anything of value which you can aggregate, put together. It could be, it could be a few pages. It could be larger, larger volume. I think that would be more of a breakthrough than anything. The most important thing is just to start.
I have a quick follow-up question on that. Also, thank you for this fantastic presentation. It literally just occurred to me as you were speaking. Did you learn things about your father and your family that changed your perception of them, that changed your perception of the legacy you are inheriting as well? And did that change have any concrete impact on your day-to-day life or interaction with everyone?
The answer is absolutely, because there was never a forum or a space. I mean, usually when you were younger, you'd go to grandma and grandpa, tell me a story, how was it, back in the dark ages, and then they would explain to you. And then you take for granted that people will remain alive. And we take for granted that, people will remember, but people sadly don't. And people sadly forget, be it by Alzheimer's or even documentation is destroyed, So I would think there was a lot of surprises, because I would talk to the elderly in our families and in our tribe, let's say, and I'd be surprised by, really, this is what he did? That's what she said? Is that how it happened? Because it was never, there was no purpose to ask such questions unless you're actually digging for a purpose to be able to document it. So when you start asking the questions, some of them are right, some of them are not, but when you simply start asking questions, you start getting a fuller picture, and that's a wonderful part. And how did that influence me? I would say, more appreciation to how humble and how simple all of it was in the early beginning, and how, we like to complicate, overcomplicate, overthink, overanalyze everything now, and how beautiful simplicity is, honestly.
I think that's definitely, something to, reflect upon, I feel. I wanted to sort of, also go back to what I think one of the attendees called gems, of wisdom. Whenever I feel, we're talking about the words of, family members, of previous generations, it's fantastic to see them in written word, but, whenever you write them down, at least for me, I always hear that voice, in my head as well, which makes it very, very, audiovisual for me, and has all these sort of memories attached to it. So maybe, that is a good segue to my next question. And we've already heard, based on the poll, that the attendees have a very clear opinion on that. But is it important for a family business leader to be aware of a family or a company's history, and why? And I think even more importantly, how does that understanding then impact the leadership?
Most important. I mean, it's all about continuing the journey at the end, If continuing the journey, maybe the players will change, but the journey itself will continue. And if you consider yourself, any founder, patriarch or otherwise, usually is a mother figure or a father figure of of much respect, and at the same time that demands some sort of authority or demands some sort of appreciation. So if you can pass this on somehow, through different generations on one hand of the personal life and through different generations of the professional life, that's wonderful. We've had our part where we've hired a non-family for our leadership for our organization, which is new grounds for us, but which we all agreed upon. And to think the impact of the thousands of families that have been part of Nehmeh across the years. Now we number in a few hundreds. But to consider all of them, that's to provide them a sort of book, or I wouldn't say memorabilia or souvenir, but to be able to give them something which they can learn from, something which were because it's part of their history. Every story starts with one person, and then a lot will follow. I think that will be my take. And when you consider the values, Martin, as well, to be able to solidify, somehow, to explain each one, because it's not just a word, it's a promise on its own, and it's a promise which you have to deliver upon. So it's not a marketing gimmick of any sort.
Interesting point. Yeah, no, it's an interesting point with regards to the marketing gimmick, because so with Tharawat, we've done obviously a lot of company visits, and we've been to a few actually family archives across Europe, especially where kind of archiving your family history is something that some of the larger families do really well. Some even have kind of foundations dedicated to the family's history. So we had the privilege to visit some of them. One is an amazing example at Pirelli, the big manufacturer in Milan. They have they have a whole house, a 15th century hunting lodge dedicated to the family's history. So it's a fantastic experience to go there. And actually some of the European families talk about the importance, not just for the family, but actually, as you're calling it a marketing gimmick, but it actually gives your partners and your stakeholders a different sense of belonging to you as a corporate partner even, right? So I wonder if you feel that, having more awareness of the history of your family business has also changed slightly relationships that you might have had, and you being transparent with that history, has it improved the quality of those relationships? And I promise our audience, I have questions on WhatsApp and on the screen, so we'll get to your questions as well, of course.
I would answer that yes. The short answer is yes. It has changed because it's written. Everything else is just verbal. Everything else is just a gentleman's agreement, or persons to interacting together and just agreeing on a few things, and just as we have in our region al-urf, so this is the understanding, and this is the real beauty of ancient tribes, where the word of mouth still has value, and if you're able to convert that word of mouth, to be able to write it, that just creates a whole platform. Mm-hmm. So questions, and people wondering what is this and what is that, are no more, simply because it is, mm-hmm. The work has been done. The references are there, the bibliographies, who said what and when, and and when you have a few people saying the same thing, then that gives you a better picture.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think it's a very interesting perspective, which I think in our region, you said in one of your slides, Ayib, like, should we do this? How do we speak about our history without damaging, our family? And it talks a lot about our relationship, with history, I think, as a population, as a region. And maybe we can come back to that question after we've addressed some of the audience's questions. So the first question I'd like to address is our attendee, who's asking if it was difficult for you to collect the original documents. Like, was that, a lot of effort? Because we know from Tharawat that people want to do the work, but then they're like, oh my God, it's going to be such a nightmare. I'll have to run from uncle to grandfather's house to, running around and collecting these things. And also, was it difficult for you to get, the family's approval on some of the things that you've written?
So, so these are two questions. I'll answer the first one. The first one is move quickly, before people pass away. I wish long life for everyone, health and well-being. But we have to remember, that we live in times where the elderly are ever more vulnerable, and memories fade. It's very sad to see people, due to Alzheimer's or otherwise, just forget particular events, So the sooner, the better. You don't have to jot everything down. You can maybe use a classical voice recorder. Tape recorder. I come from that generation, but use an MP3 recorder of sorts, and just document. Put it on draft. Is it difficult? Absolutely, it is. It is indeed difficult. The second part, did I need approval? Sure, because what was important is it wasn't, that didn't matter who the author was. What mattered is who the person's story is about, and if anybody would have stepped up, we are all there, so it was important, to get as factual as possible, and it was important, for everybody, to be part of the story as well, so that's why there's a lot of, there are some pictures of uncles and, our late founders' children, everybody's part of the conversation, honestly.
Very interesting. Martin, I was wondering, because obviously you're an expert on oral history, and our project, the FBH project, is very much rooted in oral history and the capturing of oral history. I was wondering if you wanted to comment a little bit on, what it takes to have a structured approach to collecting oral history, which is so important, and probably the starting point for many, such projects in our region.
No, I love what you said, Alexander, about, being inclusive, just making sure that everybody is part of that particular story, because that's really important. I think that level of trust, is what obviously, gets you to these memories, to these stories, to these reflections. And, I think this is obviously an old dictum of our history that, you're always, reshaping people's perceptions and memories based on the individual take on things. But through that individual take, you are able to then discover uncover and carve out, the past as these individuals have witnessed it, and sort of the texture of these emotional layers, I think, is really, really important. And at the same time, oftentimes these oral history interviews, these conversations among family members lead you to, that photo album, that letter, that particular document. Obviously, with businesses, you have legal documents, you have official document, but we all know that that's only part of the story. So many of the photographs that you showed us, were just, wonderful family memories. And that's part, I think, of a holistic approach, to the past, that you're looking at various ways, in which these sources then can inform, how you then tell the story, of something that is deeply personal. I think that's I think something that I feel is always of great value in history. But what has been your experience in having these particular conversations with various family members?
Really, I'd say enlightening, because some things I didn't know for sure. I mean, the conviction was there. It was a convincing argument that this happened and this argument. And then there were other instances where stories just didn't happen. We always believed in dragons and unicorns, but guess what? They don't exist. So it was enlightening, where it really put things in place. And again, you have to do this by comparing various notes as much as you can. Because when you refer to verbal history, stories change. It's like playing a broken telephone cassette, back when we were young. So the message changes, when it transfers from one person to another.
I mean, just a quick follow-up on that, because that's an interesting segue to something that we talked about before. There is obviously, in doing that, in doing essentially a history of your own family, the fine line between nostalgia, on the one hand, and the awareness of legacy and history. And you said it very nicely. You just all of a sudden realize, things work quite differently. So what is your take on that, and what has been the biggest surprise, on that end with writing that story?
Nostalgia is a word I try to avoid, because it does bring comfort, because when you know what happened in the past, it's more comforting than the unknowing of things to come. So there is an attraction, and people usually fall back. This becomes not necessarily a comfort zone, but a comfort time, where it was under control, stable. We knew the outcome. This would lead to that. But I'm not one who subscribes to saying that the glory days are behind us. I am more, and this is why we mentioned we embrace the future. The future changes. People change, and it's natural. So there's this continuous transformation, this continuous evolution, which is without a doubt. People will change their minds, people will change their thoughts, people will change their clothes, but at the same time, it's important to modernize this nostalgia, because, today is the nostalgia of tomorrow, right? I don't mean to sound philosophical, but this is what it is. So this conversation, perhaps many years from now, will be looked back and say, oof, they were still in color, or they were still in 2D.
2D, exactly. Very true. I think that's a very good point. Let me just pick up on a couple of questions from the audience first. So Dr. Frauke is asking, did your father come to Doha with the intention to stay and develop the company there, or was it more of a chance happening?
Thank you for the question. No, he actually came on contract. So he was working with a company called CAT back in the day, and they needed some people here, and he came in 1953. So it was a 2-year contract. And then after those 2 years, they asked him, hey, you want to stay or you want to go back? And he decided to stay. So that, this is a real life event. So that, for him, deciding to stay is why perhaps we're here having this type of conversation. And this is when we, take root of our entrepreneurial journey of the organization. But as a family, yes, I mean, we're 2 years older, perhaps, in the state of Qatar.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And there is a question as well regarding conflict, and I will contextualize it a little bit to link into what we're discussing today. So do you think that having a strong grasp of a common past is helpful when we have family business conflicts between family members, between owners?
I think it is important, but it's important to have a common vision as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have this common roots, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the vision has to be the same,
Mm-hmm.
And, there were a lot of families where, the roots were different, mind you, through mergers and other means,
Mm-hmm.
and acquisitions. And then you have other family businesses or just businesses at large where the visions were different.
Mm-hmm.
For one, I'm involved in various smaller ventures, social enterprises here and there, and at times we may disagree on particular vision,
Mm-hmm.
but what is the end goal? I think these are the important questions to ask.
Okay. So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, it's kind of part of the toolbox. It's
Sure.
not the one thing that's going to solve things, but it is definitely an important part of the toolbox.
Definitely.
To
I mean, Farida, it's not all roses and flowers,
Yes.
I mean, there are sacrifices, there are compromises, I mean, it comes with the territory, otherwise, it's best to maybe sell or even eat ice cream. I love ice cream.
which is a great patch up for conflict. I fully agree with you. My sisters and I, we do that. When we disagree, we end up eating ice cream together, and then everything is fine. So I'm aware that we have to kind of slowly start closing our conversation, and I would encourage our audience, if you have any other questions, to let us know. But we touched upon it a bit earlier on, that the relationship with history is a difficult one in our region. It is something that for a lot of people is very emotional. It's very personal. It's kind of big stories that have a huge impact on our small lives, let's say, without wanting to devalue anyone's life. So how can I, as a family member, try and work with my family to perhaps review our relationship with what history is, and then kind of reconcile ourselves, perhaps also, as you said, it's not all roses and flowers. We may come across things in our research that makes us feel uncomfortable, that makes us feel perhaps a little bit uneasy about what we've been through. How do I work on that with my family members?
I think if there is a real hunger to identify, where it is do we come from, what is the pedigree of the family, usually, as you know, in our area and every other area really around the world, usually a family name is attributed to a profession.
Yes.
So tailor is a khayyat, haddad is a blacksmith, and what have you. So if you want to identify, what is the initial spark again, of how this family of today came to be, of any family, I mean, in the Middle East or elsewhere, when you are able to go back to that, again, another life event, to the actual root of that tree, then you'll identify that, oh, okay, this is where we're from. And then that gives, and you actually build upon this. Granted, I mean, I have children of my own, and perhaps they're not too keen about, oh, history, I want to learn. They're more worried about the here and now and tomorrow. Of course. But I am one of the proponents who says, if you don't know where you're from, you don't know where you're going. Simple, and this is not philosophy. I mean, I'm standing with you. I'm speaking in the English language, but it's only because of various events, various trips, fallouts, that has happened to actually reach here. So I think if anybody who has children and loves their children enough, I think this, documenting the history of a family is the greatest gift you can give, So it's a gift for a future generation, rather than just today. Or just like this example, where you actually, plant a tree, but you don't, but you are aware that the shade of that tree, you will not be under, but you know that your children are, So if your children are able to understand, where they're coming from and how these events happen, and what are the circumstances that led to here, and most importantly, learn from the past, that can take us places, wonderful places.
Absolutely.
Let me take one question from the audience that has just come in. How do you see the book and the history help to design the future of the family and the family business? You said it's sort of a gift to the family and to the children. Is there anything concretely that you have in mind, or is it more like a spiritual guidance of the values and the philosophy?
What I came to understand is, if you look in history, there's and I don't want to mention names or go into politics, but there's a famous red book and there's a famous green book, which is close to our corner, and these books, mobilized entire populations. I'm not saying this book will serve that purpose, but what I'm saying is this book is a tool for anybody who is joining our great organization to understand how it is, and where it comes from, and where it believes it's going, by having those preset values going forth. So we ensure that within our company library, the book is available, and whenever somebody requests a copy of the book, she is given one. Just to understand better of who they represent, because you see, when you join our organization, we don't consider as an employee. You're joining a family. So that family is an extension. And when you're you really have to be transparent, and this is what we've been raised, by our ancestors, and hopefully raising our descendants as well, to teach them that you have to be straight, you have to be honest of how things are really going to be and where it is we're heading. And I really admire this about the transparency that we do so easily. And a lot of people would say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's a bit too transparent, to the point of cloaking or invisibility. But at the same time, for us, again, we live in 2022. Let's not kid ourselves. Everything's out in the open.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alexander. I think that's a very important point you just made there with regards to the balance between transparency and discretion or confidentiality. And I think that's where a lot of families actually hesitate, right? And also we've seen families in our network that probably will capture the history for themselves, and then maybe just publish what they feel comfortable publishing, right? So there is a difference between what you know internally and what you want to show externally. So I think there is a lot of freedom in terms of what other families can do as well. So being aware of time, let me ask you maybe a last question. Looking back on your experience, and considering that most of our attendees today are family business members, what can you recommend? What thoughts do you have for other family business members who'd like to perhaps not right away write a book, because I don't think everybody will have that ambition, but maybe to start capturing the history? What are some of your recommendations that you can give?
Record, document, and talk. It's important, while talking, to be able to record them. As we said, record them audio, or write down text, because when people are gone, they're gone.
Yes.
you know, and being from a region which is, you know, mostly based on the word, it gets very difficult, you know. We're not, you know, the goal here is not to have, you know, to suddenly push up the literacy rate in the Middle East, you know, that'd be nice, but you know, it is a bit more, you know, ambitious than this perhaps, but you know, once we are able, you know, to gather the people, especially the elderly, you know, if you're able to put them all together, then that's really something. I remember, you know, naturally we attend many funerals, celebrations of lives that went by, and we also, you know, for weddings the same, when we're celebrating future. But for funerals, I always love to sit next to the elderly, because, you know, they're there to see a person they've known for 60, 70 years, and here they are, you know, in their elder years, you know, God bless them all, you know, but you know, it starts counting how many seasons do I have left, you know. So you have to be able to capture that wisdom, being able to, you know, live or rather survive on this planet for, you know, 70 years or so. There's a lot to learn from. So just jot it down, you know, and there is no shame, you know. You know, I tell you bluntly, you know, for my part, it was always, should this go inside, or should, you know, or this is not appropriate, or, you know, this, and you're free to do what it is that you want, but it's important to become collecting a document. And once people start seeing pages rack up, then people start saying, wow, okay, it's not all waffle, as my children say, you know, but it is more, you know, of substance, you know. Absolutely. So I think, you know, to start ASAP.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I can only thank you, Alexander, for this truly unique insight. And I think I can see on WhatsApp and also in our chat here that our attendees are really appreciative of, you know, your narrative, the depth of your insight as well. And you keep saying you don't want to be philosophical, but I think there's nothing wrong with being a little bit philosophical about this specifically, because it is, you know, it's a deeply human topic that we are addressing here. And, you know, the question of the complexity of our identity, especially in today's world, I think, you know, if we reflect a little bit on how complex our lives have become, how fast-paced our lives have become, how difficult it is for young people, especially today, you know, with all the technology distracting them. How do you build your own identity? How do you know who you are? And I think knowing your elders and knowing what has happened before you to get you to this point is actually such an important part, you know, of who we are. And I think, as you said, I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. It's a gift both to the family, to the future generations, to your stakeholders, to your employees, that they know, where do I work? What is the ethical, philosophical makeup of the place? We spend most of our time at work, right? So how important is it for our partners and our employees to know where they are spending most of their times in? You know, I really thank you from me personally as well. It's really inspiring to hear your story. Before closing, I'd like to hand over to Martin, if you have any closing words from your side as well, Martin.
No, I think this is a resounding, you know, plea for, you know, collecting, for archiving, for holding on to, you know, what really, and that's what I loved about the poll, you know, is part and parcel of our identity. I think that I thought was a very, very wonderful, you know, result, that, you know, we're not doing this for in any way, shape, or form anything other than, you know, really truly finding out, you know, who we are, you know, what is our value system, you know, what are we doing this for, and what are we passing on to the generation? And, you know, from that angle, I think, Alexander, thank you so much for this wonderful, you know, sharing, you know, with us of your story and your family story. I think it was inspirational, it was stimulating, and I think we've learned a lot from it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And of course, thanking also our audience for being so active on all our platforms. And I can see also, some of the words that are being written in our chat now, that people really appreciated this session and your openness, Alexander. And of course, just a little commercial break before we close. At FBH, this is really what we are continuing to do. We are trying to have these meaningful conversations with people from across the region, from different industries, from different family businesses, to really understand, how important these questions are that we are facing today. So please stay tuned for kind of our summer program at FBH. We will host a couple more, webinars around the same topics, and we'd love to see all of you there. And of course, we will hear more from Alexander, I'm sure, throughout the duration of our project. So thank you everyone for being here, for spending this hour with us, and of course to Alexander for being a fantastic guest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.